Racist Coren demands a black woman leave. Then the FBI shows up. The early morning sun cast long beams of light across the polished floors of the Civic Plaza lobby. The faint aroma of fresh pastries drifted from the tuck near a corridor, inviting a slow trickle of customers who were just beginning their day. Among them was Brooks, a tall black woman in her early 30s, who had slipped in unnoticed just after the doors opened. She carried a modest leather briefcase in one hand, and her warm brown eyes constantly flicked around her surroundings with quiet awareness. Her hair was arranged in neat box braids pinned into a low bun, and she wore a crisp blouse beneath a fitted blazer. On most mornings, grabbed coffee from a cramped corner store near her apartment before heading to her job at a legal nonprofit across town. But today, she had a special purpose for visiting Civic Plaza. She needed to request public records at the city's municipal office, which was headquartered on the plaza's third floor. Worked as a researcher and paralegal, digging up information that might help underrepresented clients, often older tenants or families at risk of eviction. The documents she needed were rumored to be more accessible if she asked in person. However, as she walked into the expansive atrium, realized she was significantly early. The municipal office wouldn't open for another hour. Rather than stand around awkwardly, she decided to get breakfast from that occupied a glass-walled corner of the lobby. A pang of anticipation rippled through her. She had heard rumors the served exceptional cappuccinos, and after a restless night of preparing briefs, she could use a dose of caffeine. She found the seating area partitioned off by tall planters and clusters of small tables. Exposed brick walls and warm pendant lights created a cozy atmosphere that contrasted the gleaming marble floors outside. Inside, the line was still short. Just a businesswoman ordering a to-go coffee and a student hunched over a table reviewing textbooks. Joined the queue, the barista, a cheerful older man with silvering hair, took order. She requested a cappuccino and a small pastry, returning his friendly smile. While she waited for her drink, drifted to the corner of the shop, scanning the overhead menu and the daily specials chalked on a small board. Her mind wandered to the records request she would file in an hour, imagining how it could help a group of tenants facing unlawful rent hikes. She felt a flicker of satisfaction at the thought of making a difference. "Your cappuccino, miss." Looked up, thanked the barista, and collected her food. She eased into a nearby chair, a comfortable spot by a window that overlooked the plaza's gardens. Early sunlight spilled onto the table, illuminating her cappuccino's frothy swirl. She took a cautious sip, savoring the rich bitterness. It was indeed good. She was halfway through her pastry when she sensed a presence looming nearby. A woman stood a few feet away, staring at with open disapproval. She was white, perhaps in her mid-50s, with flawlessly blow-dried hair and wearing an elegant lilac pantsuit. Her posture was rigid, and a deep frown drew the corners of her mouth downward. Paused, feeling a slight chill. At first, wondered if the woman needed the empty seat at its table. But the wasn't crowded. Several other tables stood vacant. So the woman's intent to stare felt uncomfortably personal. Offered a small, polite nod and turned back to her cappuccino, hoping the silent approach would end there. Instead, the woman stepped closer, crossing her arms. "Excuse me," she said, her tone curt. "Are you waiting here for someone?" Glanced up, brow furrowing. "No, I'm just grabbing breakfast." The woman's lips pressed. "You have business here, then? This is the Civic Plaza, not a public lounge. People come here for official appointments." A prickle of irritation slid up spine. She forced a neutral expression. "Yes, I have business," she said evenly. "I'm waiting for the municipal office to open so I can file a request. In the meantime, I'm having coffee." The woman gave a haughty sniff. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This floor is for professionals and people who are employed in the building. Unless you're with housekeeping or maintenance." Stiffened at the insinuation. She was used to microaggressions, snide remarks about her presence in certain neighborhoods, stores, or offices, but the directness stung. Trying to maintain her composure, she replied, "I'm here in a professional capacity, yes. You don't need to worry about that." The woman's gaze swept over braids, her blazer, and the battered briefcase by her feet. A flicker of disdain marred the woman's features. She tapped her foot as though waiting for it to offer more explanation. When none came, the woman's tone grew colder. "I'm Coren. I have a long-standing relationship with many of the law offices and city departments in this building. You don't look familiar, and in my experience, people loitering around here are usually up to no good." took a measured breath. She had no desire to cause a scene, but she also refused to be intimidated. Ms., I assure you I'm not loitering. This is open to the public. I'm not breaking any rules by sitting here. Coren's cheeks flushed a hint of pink. She glanced around as though expecting support, but the few patrons nearby were either politely ignoring her or eyeing the confrontation uneasily. The barista watched from behind the counter with a worried expression. With her voice dropping to a stage whisper, Coren leaned forward. Look, dear, I'm not trying to be rude, but I have an important meeting soon. And from the looks of it, you're not part of the normal crowd here. People who come to the civic building are usually local professionals. If you're waiting for some kind of handout or trying to access resources meant for actual residents. Anger flared. She opened her mouth to retort but forced herself to remain calm. I am a resident, and I'm here on behalf of a nonprofit to file a public records request. Now please, can I finish my coffee in peace? Coren let out a small, derisive chuckle. She seemed to interpret's measured tone as docility. A nonprofit, you say? Sure. I think it's best if you just collect your things and move along. This building has certain standards. I've seen people try to sneak in before, claim they have business, but they're really just lurking. At that, rose from her seat, her posture tall. Her voice was clipped with controlled irritation. First, you don't work here, nor do you own the building, so you have no authority to demand that I leave. Second, I have a legal right to be here. Coren didn't budge. I'm a long-time client of the biggest law firm on the 6th floor. I'm here at least 3 days a week, so I know the usual faces. You, I don't recognize. Given the times we live in, I think it's perfectly reasonable to be cautious. I'd hate to see something stolen or disrupted. Lick's hands balled into fists at her sides, but she kept them subdued. Ma'am, that's enough. Stop insinuating that I'm a criminal. I have every right to be here, and your prejudice is uncalled for. A visible wave of tension pulsed through the barista took a step forward as though about to intervene, but Coren, fueled by self-righteousness, pressed on. Prejudice? Really? We don't need to make this about race. If you feel so offended, that's on you. I'm just looking out for the safety of this building. Now either show me your identification and prove you have legitimate business, or leave. At that command, temper nearly snapped. She was an adult with her own credentials, but she had no obligation to prove herself to a random woman, especially not one slinging accusations that reeked of racism. His voice trembled with anger. I don't have to show you anything. You are not security, you are not staff, and you have no right to question me like this. Coren glared, her expression taut with condescension. Fine, if you refuse to cooperate, I'll take this to building security. I'm sure they'll be interested to know about someone who can't verify why they're here. Started incredulous. Before she could respond, Coren turned on her heel and marched toward the open lobby, presumably to track down the security desk. The few patrons who had been silently watching exchanged anxious glances. The barista sighed, apologetically meeting's gaze. I'm sorry, miss, she's in here all the time, always causing issues, he murmured, forced a thin smile though her heart pounded. Not your fault. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong, but the prospect of dealing with building security, likely with Coren's twisted version of events, sent a spike of anxiety through her. If security approached with preconceived notions, could be in for a humiliating or even threatening encounter. Her phone buzzed softly in her blazer pocket. She it and saw a text from her colleague, indicating a small delay in the nonprofit's schedule. Typed a quick reply, then weighed her options. She could remain put, risking a confrontation with security, or she could attempt to speak with them first, explaining the situation. Part of her wanted to stand her ground. Why should she slink away just because someone was prejudiced? But another part dreaded a confrontation. Before she could decide, glimpsed Coren through the glass walls of the returning with a security guard in tow. The guard was a middle-aged man in a Navy uniform. He looked somewhat weary, as if he'd been dragged into these sorts of incidents more than once. Braced herself, her thoughts buzzing. Keep calm, be polite, don't let her accusations rattle you. They entered the Coren leading the way. She pointed to as though spotting a criminal. There she is, right there, Coren said, voice hushed but intense. She's refusing to identify herself or her reason for being here. I suspect she's trespassing. The guard approached, hands at his sides, posture neutral. Ma'am, he said is there a problem here? Nick drew in a slow breath. I'm just having coffee, waiting for the municipal office to open. Ms., or whatever her name is, seems to believe I have no right to be here. Coren folded her arms, shaking her head. I'm not the only one. I'm sure once we figure out who she is, we'll see she's not here for any legitimate purpose. I asked for identification and she refused. The guard exchanged a look between them, then addressed again. Ma'am, typically we only ask for ID if there's an incident or if you need to sign in for a specific office. This is a public, though it's inside the civic building. Could I just see your driver's license or something that shows your name, so I can note it down? Clenched her jaw, frustration simmering beneath her skin. She was aware that refusing the guard's request might escalate things, and she didn't want to appear uncooperative. Yet the entire situation felt deeply unfair. Still, she decided to comply if it ended this fiasco quickly. With a stiff nod, she reached into her blazer and pulled out her wallet, flipping it open to show her driver's license. The guard peered at it, took a few notes on a small pad, then handed it back. "Thank you. Do you have some business in the building today?" he asked more quietly. "Yes," replied. "I'm here to visit the municipal office at 9 o'clock. I'm picking up records under the city's Open Information Act. I'll only be here another hour or so." Coren exhaled sharply. She claims she's with a nonprofit, but so far I've seen no proof. His blood boiled, but the guard placed a hand on Coren's arm, gently motioning for her to calm down. "Ma'am, I don't need to see proof of that, if Ms. Brooks says she has business here, she's allowed to wait in the... This is a public space." Coren's face colored an angry red. "Are you just going to take her word for it?" She could say anything. The guard adopted a firmer tone. "Unless Ms. Brooks does something illegal, we have no grounds to remove her. She's not trespassing. She paid for her coffee, she has ID, and she's quietly waiting." Felt a slight wave of relief. She looked at Coren, hoping the woman would concede. But Coren, stubborn and incensed, turned back to pointing an accusatory finger. "Listen, Missy, I don't appreciate your attitude. And I don't like how you're acting like you own the place. If you have an appointment, then go wait outside the office. Don't just lounge around here. People are trying to have legitimate business meetings, and your presence is distracting." They tried to suppress her disbelief. Coren was the one causing a scene, yet she had the audacity to blame. "I'm not distracting anyone," said, voice clipped. "I'm sitting quietly, minding my business. You're the one who barged over to me." The security guard sighed. "Okay, that's enough. I need both of you to lower your voices. Ms. Brooks, you're welcome to stay. Ms., if you have a meeting, I suggest you proceed to it. There's no issue here that requires further security involvement." Coren's mouth opened and closed in silent outrage. She cast a seething glare at, then huffed. "Fine, I'll speak with the building manager about this. I'm sure they'll be interested in the kind of clientele we're attracting." With that, she pivoted, storming out of the guard watched her leave, then turned to with an apologetic shrug. "I'm sorry about that, ma'am. She's been known to cause trouble. You're fine to stay. If there's any more disturbance, let me know." Still rattled, nodded. "Thank you, I appreciate it." When the guard left, settled back into her chair. Her appetite for the remainder of her pastry was gone, and her cappuccino had grown tepid. She forced down a few sips anyway, trying to steady her nerves. She kept replaying the confrontation in her mind, anger mixing with a sense of violation. This had not been the way she intended to start her day. Her phone chimed again. Another message, this time from a who mentioned they might need additional documents from her. Decided it would be best to go upstairs soon, to stand outside the municipal office until it opened. At least that would limit further contact with Coren. She finished her drink, gathered her things, and quietly left the... She gave the barista a subdued wave, and he offered a sympathetic nod in return. Stepping into the lobby, aimed for the elevator bank at the far side. She could see the wide staircase that led to floors 2 and 3, but decided on the elevator, which was closer. As she walked, she became aware of footsteps approaching rapidly behind her. An uneasy feeling twisted in her stomach. She glanced over her shoulder, spotting Coren again, striding across the lobby in its direction. His nerves sparked, but she tried to remain calm, quickening her pace toward the elevator. The doors were just sliding open. But Coren was faster. She reached just before could enter the elevator. Planting herself in front of the elevator's threshold, Coren blocked path. "I thought about letting this go," Coren snapped. "But the more I think about it, the more convinced I am that you're lying about your purpose here. I spoke with a friend from the law firm upstairs, and she's never heard of you or your nonprofit. So I'm asking you one last time, leave this building or prove you have legitimate business. Right now." His temper flared white-hot. She could feel her hands shaking. "I've already shown my ID to security. I don't have to show you any further proof." Get out of my way. She tried to step around Coren, but the woman refused to move. Don't you dare talk to me like that, Coren hissed. I've been a respected client in this building for years, and you're nobody. She jabbed her finger towards chest. I know how people like you operate. Sneak in, cause trouble, maybe do something illegal. That's enough, snapped, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged lobby. Heads turned from across the polished floors. You don't know anything about me. You are harassing me purely because of your prejudice, and I won't stand for it. Coren's lips parted in a sneer. Oh, so now you're playing the race card, are you? Typical. Whenever someone questions your behavior, you claim it's racism. Drew back, her chest pounding. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, trembling with a mix of fury and hurt. Because that's exactly what this is. You're singling me out, calling me nobody when all I've done is quietly sit in. A hush had fallen over the lobby. A few people paused their own business to watch. In that charged silence, suddenly spotted more security arriving, 2 different guards, a man and a woman, striding quickly across the floor as if responding to a call. Maybe someone had alerted them. Felt an ugly sense of bracing for yet another confrontation. But before the guards reached them, another sound cut through the tension. The steady clack of dress shoes on marble. Turned her head and saw 3 individuals in dark suits approaching. They moved with purpose, their faces set in professional grimness. One of them, a tall black man wearing an ID badge on his breast pocket, lifted a hand as if to indicate he needed to speak with her. Frowned, uncertain. Coren also noticed them, and for a moment confusion tightened her features. She glanced around, possibly trying to figure out if they were lawyers or building officials. Then the first suited man produced a small leather credential holder, flipping it open to reveal a distinctive badge and ID. FBI. Whispers erupted among bystanders. The tension in the air shifted dramatically as the man, flanked by 2 others, a woman with cropped brown hair and a younger man carrying a briefcase, approached and Coren. Brooks. The lead agent asked, voice calm but authoritative, blinked, momentarily speechless. Yes, she managed. The agent nodded, slipping his credentials back into his pocket. We've been looking for you. My name is Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Coren's face registered shock. She seemed momentarily frozen, uncertain whether to speak or step away. Swallowed. What's going on? She asked, her voice still trembling from her heated exchange with Coren. Agent offered a reserved smile, though his eyes remained serious. We understand you're connected to a legal nonprofit that's providing evidence in a tenant discrimination investigation. We were informed we might find you here this morning, requesting certain municipal records relevant to the case. Nodded slowly. Indeed, her nonprofit had been collaborating with federal investigators on claims that a landlord group was engaging in large-scale housing discrimination. Had been collecting data and cross-referencing city records to help build that case. The FBI's involvement was relatively new, but it made sense they would keep close tabs on crucial information. Yes, that's right, said, regaining a bit of composure. I'm here to pick up some records. We were planning to send them to your office once we had them. Agent exchanged a glance with his colleagues. We're actually here to speed that process along. There have been new developments, and we'll need any records you obtain as soon as possible. We also want to escort you, in case the municipality has questions about chain of custody or anything else. Is that acceptable? Felt relief flood her chest. This meant serious progress in the case, but it also provided her with immediate validation that she was, indeed, here on legitimate and quite significant business. She nodded. Yes, of course, I'm grateful for the help. Behind her, Coren continued to stand, mouth agape, the color drained from her cheeks. She looked utterly flummoxed, as though trying to process that the black woman she'd been harassing was directly involved in an active FBI investigation. The security guards who had arrived to intervene now hovered uncertainty, clearly unsure whether they were needed. Coren cleared her throat, attempting to salvage her dignity. Excuse me, agents. I was concerned that Ms. Brooks, agent turned to her, expression neutral but with an undercurrent of professional impatience. And you are? Coren hesitated. I'm Coren. I was worried about unauthorized individuals in the building, so I... Agent raised an eyebrow. Ms. Brooks is here on official business. We're coordinating with her regarding a federal investigation. Is there a problem? Coren's gaze darted to, then back to the agents. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that she was associated with the FBI. A flicker of something like annoyance crossed Agent's face. Ms. Brooks doesn't have to be an FBI employee to conduct legitimate business in a civic building. She's working closely with us on a case, but even if she weren't, she's entitled to be here. Did you have reason to suspect otherwise? Coren swallowed, shifting from foot to foot. She seemed at a loss, unable to conjure a coherent explanation. Watched the scene with a mixture of anger and vindication. She remained quiet, letting Coren grapple with her own embarrassment. Agent glanced at. "We have an appointment with a city clerk on the 3rd floor in about 10 minutes. Would you like to ride up with us?" Nodded. "Yes, thank you." She took a step forward, making it clear she intended to bypass Coren, who was still partially blocking the elevator. The security guards stepped aside, letting the FBI agents pass. As they entered the elevator, Coren stayed put, standing awkwardly in the lobby, her face red. Didn't spare her another glance. The doors slid shut and exhaled a heavy breath, relief mingling with the lingering aftertaste of anger. Inside the elevator, Agent gave a sympathetic nod. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," he said gently. "We only arrived a minute ago, but it looked tense." Managed a thin, grateful smile. "I appreciate that. She's been harassing me since I walked into the building, accusing me of trespassing or planning something shady." Agent's colleague, the woman with cropped brown hair, shook her head. "Some people can't mind their own business. You'd be surprised how often we see that while on cases." Puffed out a breath. "I'm not surprised at all. Unfortunately, it happens too often." The elevator dinged, and they stepped onto the 3rd floor. A short corridor led to the municipal clerk's office, where a young staff member at the reception desk greeted them. The presence of 3 suited FBI agents lent an immediate air of seriousness, and the clerk quickly motioned for to sign in and take a seat. Within minutes, a senior clerk emerged, flustered but determined to be helpful. The clerk retrieved the packet of records, had requested a combination of zoning documents, property transaction histories, and complaint logs relevant to the landlord group under investigation. And the agents reviewed it, verifying completeness. Agent signed a form to indicate the FBI was taking partial custody of the documents for investigative purposes. While they worked, gradually felt the tension from her encounter with Coren. She focused on the excitement of moving forward with the case. This investigation could change the lives of many tenants. She was glad to be a part of it, even if the morning's confrontation had tested her composure. Once they finished, Agent extended his hand too. "Thank you for your cooperation and for the work you're doing with the nonprofit. We'll be in touch soon. My team and I may need additional records or testimony from you in the near future." Shook his hand. "Of course, I'll do whatever I can to help." The agents departed to continue their own tasks, leaving with a sense of renewed purpose. She clutched the copies of the documents meant for her nonprofit. Relief and triumph mingled, overshadowing the earlier humiliation. Yet as stepped into the hallway, heading back to the elevator, she spotted Coren near the far end of the corridor. The older woman loitered there, presumably to see if really had business or if the FBI's presence was some kind of illusion. When she saw, she tensed, then approached slowly. Its initial reaction was to keep walking, ignoring Coren entirely, but something in Coren's expression seemed different, contrite perhaps. She wrung her hands together. "Excuse me," she murmured, her voice subdued. "I didn't mean to cause so much trouble. I was just concerned. You have to understand there are a lot of people who come through here without clearance." Eyed her warily. "That doesn't justify the way you treated me." Coren's gaze flicked to the floor. "I know. I suppose I might have jumped to conclusions. If I'd known the FBI was involved, that you were part of something official, I wouldn't." "That's the point," interrupted quietly. "You shouldn't need to know the FBI is involved or that I'm here on official business. I'm just a person grabbing coffee, waiting for an office to open. And that should be enough." Coren swallowed, color creeping back into her cheeks. She seemed at a loss for words, her pride and embarrassment tangling. "Right, yes, with everything going on in the world, one can't be too careful." His temper flared again. "What's going on in the world doesn't give you the right to racially profile me. You demanded I leave for no reason beyond your own bias. That's unacceptable." Coren's face contorted, as though struggling internally. For a moment it seemed she might argue again, but after a tense silence she nodded curtly. "You're right, I overreacted, I'm sorry." The apology landed awkwardly, lacking warmth, but recognized at least a semblance of admission. She exhaled a slow breath, her shoulders easing fractionally. "Thank you for saying that. I hope in the future you'll think twice before assuming someone doesn't belong." Coren's eyes flickered, perhaps with guilt or resentment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away down the hall, heels clicking against the floor. Watched her go, feeling a complicated swirl of relief, lingering anger and pity. She sensed Coren's apology might be more about saving face than genuine regret, but perhaps it was a start. Slipped back into the elevator, pressing the button for the ground floor. She reminded herself that not every confrontation ended neatly with a heartfelt resolution. Sometimes, you simply had to move on, clinging to the knowledge that you stood your ground and the truth prevailed. The ride down was quiet, granting space to reflect on everything that had happened. She thought about the many times she and others in her community had faced subtle or overt discrimination, often without external validation. Today, ironically, the FBI's timely entrance had cast a stark light on Coren's baseless accusations, giving an instant measure of vindication. But what about those who didn't have an official reason to be somewhere, or the good fortune of a dramatic reveal that proved they were legitimate? They faced the same kind of bigotry, without a convenient twist. A moral weight settled in his chest. She vowed to keep fighting, not just for tenants or those impacted by housing discrimination, but for everyday respect and the dismantling of biases that caused these humiliating incidents. Perhaps that was part of her purpose, using her legal training and empathy to hold people accountable and push for systemic change. When the elevator reached the lobby, stepped out. She paused in front of the reflection in the polished elevator doors, smoothing her blazer and reminding herself she had plenty of reason to hold her head high. The morning had started with pastries and coffee, marred by a jarring confrontation, yet it ended with progress on a crucial case and a measure of justice. Crossing the marble floor toward the exit, spotted the again. The barista behind the counter caught her eye, raising a hand in a subtle wave of solidarity. Offered a small smile. She might just come back another day, buy another cappuccino, and occupy that same seat, unafraid and unapologetic. She stepped outside into the crisp mid-morning air. The city sprawled before her, sunshine glinting off tall buildings. She glanced at her phone, checking the time. Still enough hours left in the day to finalize her nonprofit's legal documents, coordinate with the FBI for the next steps, and hopefully get some rest. As headed to the bus stop, the warmth of the sun on her face felt like a promise. She replayed the moment agent and his team flashed their badges, stepping in like an unexpected cavalry. She couldn't help a small chuckle at the memory of Coren's stunned expression. Yet beyond the personal satisfaction lay a deeper truth. Bigotry thrived on assumptions and illusions. When confronted with undeniable facts, like legitimate presence and partnership with federal authorities, those illusions crumbled. Of course, Coren might remain entrenched in her prejudice, but recognized that a single experience, a single humiliating outcome, sometimes forced people to reflect. Maybe, just maybe, the next time Coren or someone like her was tempted to question whether a black woman belonged somewhere, they'd remember this day and think twice. The bus arrived and boarded, sliding into a seat by the window. As she looked out at the passing streets, she allowed herself a moment to breathe in the satisfaction of small triumphs. The day had begun with confrontation and ended with a measure of justice. She understood that the deeper battles, fighting racism, prejudice, and systemic injustice, were far from over, but each day's victory would accumulate into lasting change. By the time she reached her destination, her nonprofit's modest office in a converted brownstone felt a renewed sense of determination. She walked into the building, sharing a quick greeting with the receptionist. Then she headed to her desk, where files and reference books waited. She set down her bag, carefully placed the new municipal records into a folder, and booted up her computer. Poked her head over the partition. "Morning, did you manage to get those documents?" Shot her a wry grin. "I did, and you wouldn't believe the story of how it happened." This eyebrows rose. "Oh, do tell." With a small sigh and a faint smile, began recounting the bizarre series of events. The prejudiced confrontation, the arrival of security, and finally, the FBI stepping in with impeccable timing. She kept her voice calm, though the undercurrent of emotional intensity remained. Her listened in disbelief, shaking her head at the audacity of Coren and cheering at the triumphant twist. Finished her tale with the mention of how Coren had demanded leave only for the FBI to appear. Then let out a sharp laugh, smacking her palm against the desk. "That's some serious karma. Unbelievable." Shrugged, a bittersweet smile on her lips. Yeah, it was satisfying at that moment. But it also reminded me that so many other people face similar racism daily, without an FBI cavalry to back them up. Her nodded solemnly. True, but at least in this case you got a little justice, and I bet that woman will think twice next time she tries to bully someone. Exhaled, gazing at the stack of documents on her desk. That's what I'm hoping anyway. She turned her attention to the papers, feeling the weight of them both physically and symbolically. These records might help unravel a system of unlawful discrimination, enabling families to remain in their homes. On a more personal level, the morning's events had reaffirmed something essential. Had a voice, a purpose, and the resilience to stand tall in the face of hatred. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of phone calls, scanning documents, and drafting memoranda. Several times, received calls from Agent or his team, coordinating the handoff of documents and next steps. Each conversation strengthened the sense of partnership between the nonprofit and federal investigators. The landlord group's illegal practices were about to face a formidable challenge, and was proud to be a crucial link in that process. By late afternoon, her eyes were tired from reading, and her stomach grumbled for food. She realized she hadn't eaten much since the coffee shop fiasco. Gathering her things, she decided to head home. Stepping outside, the city's bustle greeted her, cars honking, pedestrians weaving along the sidewalk, the sky's color shifting to a gentle orange as the sun lowered. She walked to the nearest bus stop, her mind still replaying everything. Would she run into Coren again? Possibly, if they both frequented the civic building. Did she expect a heartfelt apology from Coren in the future? Likely not. But could find solace in the knowledge that, for at least one morning, prejudice met a swift and public rebuke, and a bigger cause, one with real stakes for marginalized tenants, gained momentum. She allowed the day's tension to melt away, replaced by a deeper resolve. Her job, her mission, and her convictions were valid and vital, no matter who questioned her worth. She recalled the FBI badges glinting under the lobby lights, a stark testament that she wasn't just any bystander. She was a woman on a mission that mattered. When the bus came, boarded, found a seat and leaned her head back, letting the city lights blur past the windows. For the first time in hours, her pulse began to slow to a calmer rhythm. The swirl of confrontation, the flush of anger, and even the relief of the FBI's arrival, she could release all that, at least for the moment. Tomorrow, new challenges awaited. But tonight, she would rest knowing that, in her own quiet way, she had stood up to bigotry and refused to be dismissed or diminished. The next morning, woke to a series of messages from colleagues. They had read her report on the new municipal records and recognized the potential bombshell evidence hidden within the data. Their excitement was palpable. She quickly got ready, hopped on a bus, and arrived at the office, launching straight into a staff meeting. During the meeting, she presented her findings. A pattern of illegally inflated rents targeting Black and Hispanic tenants, suspicious eviction notices timed just before lease renewals, and other discriminatory practices that strongly indicated a system-wide scheme. The entire nonprofit team buzzed with energy, brainstorming how to collaborate more extensively with the FBI. They could now press city officials, and perhaps even the Department of Justice, to take more robust action. After the meeting wrapped, stepped out into the corridor, her phone in hand, about to schedule a call with Agent. She felt a small surge of pride. In a few weeks, maybe even days, her evidence could lead to legal action that would protect countless vulnerable residents. And in a way, the ordeal with Coren had only strengthened her resolve to see justice served. The rest of that week was a blur of progress. Spent long hours analyzing spreadsheets, scanning old property deeds, and cross-referencing city records. She occasionally caught herself thinking about Coren's hostility, how it reflected a broader, insidious problem in society. If people like Coren could be so blatant in their prejudice in a public, well-monitored space, what other injustices were quietly unfolding behind closed doors? The question fueled sense of purpose. Word filtered through the grapevine that Coren had lodged a complaint with the building manager about security lapses. That rumor reached through this barista, who sometimes chatted with nonprofit staff. Simply shrugged it off. The building manager, evidently, had dismissed Coren's complaint, stating that the building's security had handled the situation appropriately. Took quiet satisfaction in that tidbit, though it did make her wonder if Coren would try to cause more trouble in the future. But as the days passed, there were no further confrontations. Continued to visit Civic Plaza to update records or meet with city clerks, sometimes glimpsing Coren from afar. though Coren always avoided eye contact. Their entire dynamic had shifted, overshadowed by the FBI's unequivocal validation of his presence. Coren's once outspoken nature seemed muted whenever was nearby. By the end of the second week, his nonprofit had compiled enough evidence to file a formal complaint with the city attorney's office, assisted by the FBI's ongoing investigation. Late on a Friday afternoon, typed up the final lines of the complaint, attached the relevant exhibits, and sent them to both the city attorney and agent's team. She leaned back in her chair, a wave of relief washing over her. It wasn't the end of the fight, far from it. Litigation or negotiations with the landlords would likely follow, possibly culminating in a civil rights lawsuit. But it was a significant milestone, one that showcased its unwavering commitment. As she powered down her computer, her phone buzzed with a text from Agent. "Received your docs. Great work. This will be a game changer. Thank you for everything." A smile tugged its lips. She slipped her phone into her pocket, grabbed her jacket, and headed out of the office. The evening sky was streaked with shades of pink and gold, a perfect backdrop for the sense of achievement she felt. The recollection of Coren's antagonism now felt distant, like an unwelcome gust of wind that had long since passed, overshadowed by the bright horizon of what they were accomplishing. Yet in the quiet of her commute home, allowed herself a moment to reflect on the moral of the entire saga. Yes, the FBI's arrival had delivered dramatic justice that day in the lobby, exposing Coren's prejudice as baseless and ridiculous. But not everyone harassed by bigotry gets that cinematic reveal. Too many are left with the sting of humiliation, no official badge or agent stepping in on their behalf. That reality weighed on his heart, reinforcing her resolve to keep fighting. For fairness, for accountability, for the countless individuals who lacked the privilege of a public gotcha moment. By the time she reached her apartment, the city lights were twinkling. She climbed the stairs to her second-floor unit, feeling exhaustion in her limbs but pride in her chest. She unlocked the door, dropped her briefcase near the sofa, and flicked on a lamp. The space was modest, a small living room with a worn but comfortable couch, a tiny kitchen corner, and a desk stacked with case files. Standing by the window, gazed out at the view of and passing cars. She thought of the tenants she was helping, the difference she might make if the FBI's case succeeded. And she thought of Coren, one face among many who needed to learn the lesson that no one's presence is less valid due to their race or appearance. In that quiet moment, resolved to keep that lesson alive in her work. She might not be an FBI agent or a powerful politician, but she had knowledge, empathy, and an unwavering sense of justice. If she could keep leveraging those strengths, perhaps more stories like her own would end with a measure of vindication. And ultimately, fewer such confrontations might occur in the first place. Slipping off her shoes, set her phone on the charger, made herself a simple dinner, and let the week's tension fade. As she ate, she replayed the final memory of that day in the lobby. Coren's shocked expression when the FBI agents approached, addressing her with respect and seriousness. It was a reminder that sometimes the universe offers small, serendipitous moments of retribution. But beyond retribution lay an even more meaningful outcome. The bigger picture was that presence in that building was not only legitimate, it was essential. She was there to uncover truths that would protect people who faced real injustice. Coren's prejudice almost succeeded in throwing up an obstacle, yet justice arrived in more ways than one. Not only had stood her ground, she had also moved forward with her mission, forging a path for greater accountability. Late that night, as flicked off the living room lamp and prepared for bed, she whispered a silent gratitude for her supportive, for the timely intervention of the FBI, and for the spark of resilience that kept her strong in the face of racism. She knew the road ahead would feature more battles, more pushback from those threatened by progress. But she would meet them with the same unwavering stance, buoyed by the knowledge that there were people out there, like the federal agents, her colleagues, and the barista who showed silent support, who believed in the same cause. Ultimately, that morning's drama in the Civic Plaza had revealed a simple yet profound truth. Bigotry cannot stand unchallenged when people refuse to yield. No matter how self-assured a Coren might be in her cruelty, no matter how confidently she demands that a black woman leave, justice can, and often will, arrive in unexpected ways. Sometimes it wears the calm face of an FBI agent. Sometimes it emerges in a tide of public condemnation. And sometimes it grows from the quiet, steady efforts of individuals like who carry the torch of fairness forward, even when no one is watching. fell asleep with that thought guiding her dreams, the echo of the day's confrontation washed away by a deep assurance. She belonged wherever she needed to be, and no one's ignorance or hatred could ever change that fundamental truth. She had proven as much, and tomorrow she would continue proving it, one act of justice at a time.